I guess where we can start off here is our overflow jug. So that was the indication there that we're leaking some antifreeze. We had to keep topping that up, and also to the oil. So first and foremost, it's hard to see in there, but right in there on the top, that's your rack and pinion, and that's where your steering shaft is going in there. If you climbed up underneath the vehicle, you can see where the oil is leaking from that location, and it's running down and it's running all along the body, and it's kind of difficult to see where it's leaking from because everything's wet and dirty. We traced it back to that. We're not going to be able to fix that right away because it's a pretty big job and it's winter time, and we kind of need to keep using this vehicle, so that's going to have to wait till spring. We'll just keep topping up the fluid because obviously that's getting low too. Your major indicators when your steering is screaming, right? Have that whiny sound. The fluid level's too low, but that's where we sourced one of the leaks is coming from that top seal there. If we take a look over here, so this is our water pump there, and then you can see down underneath the bottom of the water pump and down in here you can see where it's kind of discolored. Like if you compare it to from up here to down there, you can see something's going on. It shows better on this side. You can see where it's dark down there. That's going to be the antifreeze. It's going to be the water pump. This is the water pump here, like these two bolts here, and this dark area down in there. I do believe that's where we're getting our leak from our antifreeze. Now, if you take a look and you follow it down, it goes down to that small, or that lower neck. It's two little bolts there, and you take that off and your thermostat's in behind there. Now, if you crawled underneath the vehicle, you'll see a drip on the bottom of this thing. Now, the last one is our harmonic balancer down there, and there should be a seal in behind that, and that would be the oil. So again, if we crawled up underneath, we should be able to see where it's discolored, and it's difficult to actually see the oil leaking from there. And again, that might be a running condition as well. As you're driving, it's leaking out that seal, and it's very gradual. Like, it's not a leak that is we'll say an emergency fix, has to be done right away. I'm going to target that first. And the reason I'm going to do that is because you can fix that seal without having to drain the oil or do an oil change or anything like that. So we're going to do that one first, and then if that seems to fix our problem, then I'm not worried about having to drop the oil pan, because I did go under there, and of course it's really dirty, hard to tell, but all the bolts were tight. There was no loose bolts or anything on the oil pan to indicate a leak there. So we're going to target this first, and then if we still have some issues, then we're going to look at that oil pan. The oil pan is going to be a larger job. There's an antifreeze drip on the bottom of that thermostat housing right there. So either it's leaking from the thermostat housing, or it's migrating from the water pump up above, and that's the low point drip where it's showing. Or a combination of both. We don't know yet. And then in here, like it's wet in here, we could have antifreeze and oil, or one or the other. We'll find out again once we get that harmonic balancer off. But we know that we're leaking oil because we've got to top up the oil, and we know that we're leaking antifreeze because we've got to top up the antifreeze. First thing we did was, there's a petcock down there. You're going to turn that counterclockwise, facing the opposite way there. There's a hose connected to the bottom of that, and then I just routed it down and then drain everything into the tub down there. And also too, if you want to have that drain faster, what you can do is you can remove this air bleed here off the top, and then that will allow it to drain faster. What I ended up doing was I just disconnected the top hose from the top right here after it started draining for a period of time. Just cracked that loose. It drains a little faster after that once you kind of break the system open to atmosphere. Next was our fan that goes in here in front of the rad. So there's 4 bolts, one there, one down there, and one here. Those are all going to be 10 mil. Here's the fan here, and here are those 4 bolts. One there, one there, one there, one there. You remove those, 10 mil, and then there's this electrical plug you disconnect, and then you can remove that whole thing out of the Jeep. Okay, now when removing that out of the Jeep, you're gonna have to disconnect this upper hose because it's in the way right here. That's in the way, and this is where it unbolts, and so that ear, it has to come straight up. So you got to disconnect that hose in order to get that fan out. And then on this side, you're gonna have to kind of manipulate it around this thing here and pull it straight up and get it out of the way. I guess first thing is we need to remove our serpentine belt, and then we're gonna get at removing our harmonic balancer and our water pump here. Basically this tensioner right there, it's got a ratchet with a 15 mil socket on there, and it's gonna go clockwise. Got a long bar on here, it's just a piece of pipe, goes over the handle. Pull it clockwise, and then it'll release the tension in. Then you can get your belt off of there, and then just take it off. If you don't have a sticker that tells you how the belt is routed, maybe a good idea might be to just take a quick sketch of how the belt is routed around all of the pulleys here. So when you put it back on, you got it on the right way. Because we took off that idler pulley there, and it should be the same as that, which would be like 15 millimeter. Counterclockwise, pull that out. We've got our thermostat housing and thermostat down there. I do believe the 2 bolts on that were 8 millimeter to remove that. And then on the bottom here, we have our harmonic balancer. I believe it was a 13/16 that I used to remove that. So pull the bolt out, and then we need a 3-job puller to remove the harmonic balancer. As we can see, most of our dirt and grime is right in there, so I do believe that seal is compromised. That's the front crank seal, so that was our oil leak. Our water pump here, there should be a weep hole. Can't see it, but it's in behind the pulley here at the bottom of the water pump. When your coolant leaks out of there, that weep hole, that tells you that your water pump needs to be replaced. And it does look like it's coming down from the bottom of the water pump, and it comes down in here along there and then down to the bottom here. And that's possibly why it was dripping off the bottom like we thought. If you can see right there at the very center bottom of the water pump where it's kind of shiny, that looks like where it's leaking. And it kind of comes down and it comes along here, and then it would along the edge there, see that kind of that little valley there, and then it drips off the bottom of there. So that's where it was coming. It was coming off the bottom of the weep hole there, and then it migrates its way down to that bottom bolt, and then that's where we've seen our drip from. It is the pump. It wasn't the thermostat housing or seal there, and I'll show you. It doesn't look like there's any trouble there, but we take it off and take a look anyway. And then also too, you see how grimy it is. See how grimy it is on the bottom and all around where that harmonic balancer was. So we've had a minor oil leak on there for a while, and now with both of them combined, antifreeze and oil, we've just got a bigger mess to deal with, and then it's harder to kind of find out where things are coming from. So we got some components here. Here's that idler, and that's that 15 millimeter. You just remove this and take that off there, and you're just going to spin this, and it spins fine, but it sounds it's got a little more noise to it than what I'd like. So I'm going to take these covers off front and back. You take this, pop this out of there with a pick or a small flat screwdriver or something on this side and on that side, and then you just put some grease in there. The bearing seems pretty good, but we just want to re-lubricate that, put it back in. So that was the idler right there. This here was the lower the thermostat housing, and when we took a look inside there, and then on the face of that, we didn't see any leaks anywhere. We don't see any cracks. We don't see anything here other than it's just dirty. No problem there. when we take the thermostat out, we don't see any problem with the gasket here. This all looks good. The thermostat looks good. There was no problem that way. The vehicle had lots of heat. And this thermostat here also has like this emergency overflow kind of check valve, if that's what you want to call it. So if the thermostat does freeze, or it's seized and it's not working properly, at least you'll have a minimum amount of fluid that's coming through this hole here. So that might kind of save you a little bit. And then when we get over to our harmonic balancer here, now this isn't good. Like, this is that rubber. There's a rubber disc, or whatever you want to call it, that's in there. And it's got a chunk missing here. It's got another couple chunks missing there. That's not good. We're going to replace that. Here's that bolt that we took out. As I said, I don't know what the metric size for it was, but I was able to put a 13/16 on there. And then you're going to need like a three jaw puller. And the 3-jaw puller, those 3 jaws will fit on here. 1, 2, 3. And it's going to push up against the shaft. Now with this bolt removed, all you're going to have is an open threaded hole. And you don't want this wrecking those threads or whatever. So get yourself a shaft saver. And in my case, my shaft saver was pretty small. This is a pretty small kind of unit. So what I just did was just found a piece of steel with a hollow in there. And then I felt that hollow was too big for the end. So I just put my shaft saver up against that and just taped it on. So everything held itself together as we put it together and remove that. So then the new one, when we put that in, once we line it up with our keyway and everything like that, we'll just line it up and then we'll suck it back in with the bolt. And then we just have to replace that seal that goes around the shaft here. We removed that water pump there, and when we did that, we left all the bolts in place. So we put them all in the same spot. So basically I loosened them all off and left them where they were, and then took everything off in one complete assembly so we don't mix those bolts up. And then we went in and we tried to clean everything up as good as we could. These are sealing surfaces for the water pump and down for the thermostat housing down there, and also all that gunk and crap that was down there. So if we do have another leak, hopefully it'll be easier to see. This front crankshaft seal here, what I did was I put a screw into the seal, and then I just use a tool like this, get in there and pry that out of there. It'll pop right off. As always, I just smear some RTV sealant around the outside of the seal there. I'm going to let that sit for about 15-20 minutes, tack up, and then we'll put that seal back into place. What I did was I just put rags in all those holes and orifices, so when we were cleaning up the front of the engine, we wouldn't get anything inside, to keep everything clean. Put in that thermostat housing. The thermostat, remember, basically the guts go into the engine and the pointy end comes out, so the flow is coming from the engine to the radiator. Those bolts there, I looked it up and it looks like I got some different numbers. I got anywhere from 105 to 150 inch-pounds, so I just kind of went in the middle at about 130 inch-pounds, give or take, and that was an 8mm on there. Got the new hose on, pinch clamps, that's all good down there, right there. So then putting the seal on here, we let that RTV sealant tack up around the outside of the seal. And then what I just used was this, I just got this plate here that covered the whole face of the seal, and then I just used a little piece of key stock or metal, and then I'm just gonna tap it from side to side, up and down, until I slowly get it into place, and you just keep doing that until it bottoms out, and you'll feel it. You'll be able to tell by the sound, and you'll be able to tell by the feel of it when the seal bottoms out in the bottom there. Once we got that seal in, we're gonna have to use some grease, and you can also put some grease on the back side of this where the spring is. On this seal, it doesn't look like that spring is in threat of coming off as you're kind of pounding it on. But if you want to, you know, just for safety's sake, you want to help secure that with some grease, put a little bit of grease on the backside where the spring is. But we definitely need to put some grease on the shaft here, and then on the basically more where the sealing surface is on the dampener. We'll put some grease on the outside of where the dampener is, where that rides against the seal, and that's as we put the damper in there. That's going to hopefully make sure that everything's all good there. It's going to slide into place nice and not wreck that seal and everything. We got that water pump bolted on there, and as I said before, I just removed the old pump with all the bolts in their locations. I had a bad experience one time where 2 bolts got mixed up, and there was just a difference of like a 1/4 inch or less, maybe even an 1/8. And what happened was it popped a hole into my number 1 cylinder bore. So ever since then, I want to make sure that all the bolts go back in the right place. And we got them torqued down. The torque I found was 43 foot-pounds for this application. On these new pumps here, when you're installing them, you just get your gasket and you're going to put it in there, and you can't go wrong. Like basically it's got a tab in there, so you stick it in and put it all, make sure it's seated all the way down, and then bolt it on, torque it up. This one here, I noticed it doesn't, if at first glance it doesn't look that bad. In the white area, you bend it and you can see that it's cracking and separating. I couldn't actually find a damage spot on the gasket there where it was leaking. I don't know if it was leaking from the packing, from the shaft here, and just gravity. The leak was coming from, you know, the bottom of the pump, coming out here and behind there somewhere. As always, after we're done doing this, all this work here, there's a pipe plug in the top here. That's the highest point. So you want to remove that plug and let it run and let all the air bubble out of there. The more air you get out of there, the better it'll be. I might have missed talking about installing the harmonic balancer there. There's nothing to it. You just line it up at the keyway, put the bolt in, and tighten it up. I didn't torque it down. I just went with the impact, because if you're torquing it down, you're going to need a bar to hold that static while you're torquing the bolt up. And I do believe that it said 130 foot-pounds was the torque that I researched and found. But I just rattled it tight with the impact. I think it'll be good, and it was tight going on, so I don't think that'll be an issue. So she's all done here. That plug, we put that back in. That's a pipe plug, so it's going to seal itself when you put it in. I personally put a little bit of dope on there. It's the liquid version of the white Teflon tape. We checked, we don't see any leaks after we've put that plug in and cleaned everything up. I blew everything down with compressed air, and then checking for leaks. And we'll go take this thing for a test drive. And that is also where you put your antifreeze in, by the way, with a small funnel. You just take that plug out and use a small funnel and fill it up right there. There's a charge system. So I think that covers everything.